The Pacific Ocean had always been restless, but this was different. What started as a shimmering anomaly near the Mariana Trench quickly grew into something no one could explain. A vast, pulsating rift in the fabric of reality hovered above the waters, glowing with a kaleidoscope of colors that defied description. Ships sent to investigate vanished without a trace. Satellites failed to transmit coherent images. Then the anomalies began. Honolulu was the first to fall. Overnight, the modern city was replaced with a dense, prehistoric jungle. Military drones captured footage of massive beasts stomping through the ruins, creatures that hadn't walked the earth in millions of years. Tokyo was next. Reports of medieval knights clashing with cybernetic drones in Shibuya were dismissed as a hoax, until live footage showed towering war machines razing entire districts. The governments of the world scrambled to respond, but their efforts were disjointed and futile. The rift wasn't just an event, it was a declaration of war from forces beyond comprehension. That's when Colonel Iris Vega received the call. Iris stood at the edge of the airfield, her sharp gaze fixed on the horizon as the Black Ops transport jet descended. Her team waited behind her, silent and uneasy. Everyone had heard the rumors about the rift, but the official reports were even worse. The brief flashes of calm she once found in routine deployments were now distant memories. The jet's engines roared as it touched down. A tall, wiry man in a lab coat emerged, clutching a secure metal case. His disheveled appearance and bloodshot eyes betrayed weeks of sleepless nights. Dr. Elias Carr, the lead scientist on temporal mechanics, wasted no time as he approached Iris. "We don't have weeks," he said without preamble. "We barely have days." Iris frowned. "What exactly are we dealing with, Doctor? The reports are vague at best, and the chaos out there isn't helping." Carr opened the case, revealing a holographic projector. The image it displayed was enough to silence even the most skeptical in her team. A rotating model of the rift, with complex equations and timelines branching off it like veins in a dying leaf. "It's a tear in time," Carr explained, his voice tight with urgency. "A deliberate one. Someone, or something, is rewriting history by targeting key events. Entire moments of humanity's existence are being erased, replaced by fragments. Alternative outcomes. If we don't stop it, there won't be a timeline left to save." "Who's behind this?" Iris demanded. Carr hesitated, his jaw tightening. "They call themselves the Temporal Sovereigns. We don't know much about them except that they're from the far future, and they believe humanity has squandered its potential. Their solution is simple: start over by erasing us." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Iris turned to her team, her voice steady and commanding. "Prepare for deployment. Whatever they've started, we'll finish. Humanity isn't going down without a fight." As the team moved into action, Carr handed Iris a datapad containing schematics for their only chance: the Epoch Breaker, a time-capable starship powerful enough to breach the rift. "This chip is experimental," Carr warned. "One mistake, and we'll be stranded in a timeline worse than this one." Iris's lips curled into a grim smile. "Stranded or not, we'll make them regret underestimating us." In the distance, the rift pulsed brighter, its energy rippling across the ocean. The war against time had begun. The Epoch Breaker's hangar bustled with frantic activity as engineers scrambled to finish last-minute calibrations. Sparks flew from welding torches, and the low hum of testing equipment filled the air. It was humanity's most advanced vessel, built with a combination of cutting-edge engineering and Carr's borderline mad theories on temporal mechanics. Yet, as Colonel Iris Vega stood in the middle of the chaos, she knew the ship alone wouldn't be enough. The mission needed people capable of facing the unknown. Her first choice was already waiting in the command room, leaning casually against the holo table like he owned the place. Dr. Elias Carr, as brilliant as he was insufferable, smirked as Iris entered. "Relax, Colonel. This chip is a masterpiece. It won't let us down, Carr said, gesturing toward the hologram of the epoch breaker spinning lazily above the table. Iris gave him a sharp look. I'm not worried about the ship. I'm worried about who's going to crew it. Carr raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. You've got a list. Not just any list, she replied. The best, or the most desperate. She didn't have to wait long for the first arrival. Wrecker Holt, a grizzled combat engineer with a reputation for thriving in chaos, entered with a cocky swagger. He had the build of a prizefighter and the scars to match. His skills in battlefield improvisation had saved countless lives, but his history of insubordination had left him a liability in most commands. I hear you've got a suicide mission lined up, Holt said, his voice gravelly but laced with humor. Perfect. I was getting bored. Good, Iris replied curtly. You'll have plenty to do. The next recruit was Kiara Sun, a former pilot grounded after losing her family in one of the rift's early anomalies. Her eyes were sharp, but there was a haunted look behind them. When she walked in, she carried herself with quiet determination. Colonel, Kiara said, saluting stiffly. I'm ready for whatever you need. Iris nodded, seeing the resolve in her. You'll be our flight lead. Just don't make any hero moves without orders. Finally, Delta arrived. The room seemed to grow colder as she entered. She was an anomaly herself, a woman claiming to be a refugee from the future, with knowledge of the temporal sovereigns and their tactics. Her silver hair and piercing gaze gave her an otherworldly presence, and though she said little, everyone in the room felt the weight of her confidence. Colonel Vega, Delta said, her voice calm and even. I'm here because your survival depends on it. The sovereigns won't hesitate, neither can you. The room fell silent as Iris sized her up. Trust would be a problem, but they needed every advantage. Carr broke the tension, clapping his hands together. Well, isn't this a merry band of misfits? Shall we start breaking time? Iris ignored him and addressed the crew. This is it. Once we step aboard the epoch breaker, there's no turning back. If anyone's having second thoughts, leave now. No one moved. Good, she said. Get to your stations. We leave in 6 hours. History is waiting for us to save it. The epoch breaker shuddered as it completed its first temporal jump. The bridge crew braced themselves, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights of the console displays. Outside the viewport, space and time writhed like a living thing, twisting with kaleidoscopic colors that defied explanation. Colonel Iris Vega tightened her grip on her command console. Status report, she barked. Temporal drive stabilized, Dr. Elias Carr said, his voice barely masking his excitement. I told you it would work. Perfect execution. Well, almost. Almost? Iris's tone turned sharp. There's some residual distortion, Carr admitted, tapping furiously at his console. It'll fade in a few minutes. Probably. Probably isn't good enough, Doctor, Iris snapped. Before Carr could retort, Kiara Sun's voice cut through the tension. You two can argue later. We've got incoming. On the main display, an alien starfield materialized, a desolate region of space littered with debris from an ancient battle. Among the wreckage, sleek, angular ships emerged, their surfaces gleaming unnaturally as if rejecting the very laws of physics. Sovereign enforcers, Delta said, her voice calm but firm. Their technology is centuries ahead of yours. They'll try to disable us before we can fully orient to this timeline. Suggestions? Iris asked, already scanning the tactical readouts. Don't die, Delta replied flatly. Wrecker Holt let out a low whistle. That's comforting. Brace for impact, Kiara shouted. The enforcers opened fire, beams of pure temporal energy ripping through the void. The ship's shields groaned under the assault, sending vibrations through every deck. Shields at 70%, Holt reported from the engineering station. We can't take that for long. Evasive maneuvers, Iris ordered. Kiara, show me what you've got. With practiced precision, Kiera spun the epoch breaker into a sharp dive, weaving through the floating debris field. The Sovereign ships pursued relentlessly, their weapons carving paths of destruction through the wreckage. "They're too fast," Carr said, his fingers dancing across his console. "We need a way to level the playing field." Delta stepped forward. "Deploy the temporal anchor." Carr froze. "You're insane. That device hasn't been tested." "Do it," Iris commanded. "What's the risk?" Delta's gaze didn't waver. "It'll trap them in a localized time loop for a few seconds, just enough for us to strike. If it fails, well, we won't be around to care." Carr hesitated but followed orders, activating the anchor. A pulse of energy erupted from the ship, and for a fleeting moment, the Sovereign vessels froze mid-attack. "Now," Iris shouted. Kiera took the opportunity, swinging the epoch breaker around and unleashing a barrage of railgun fire. The projectiles tore through the enforcers, reducing them to shimmering fragments. As the final enemy ship disintegrated, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. "That was too close," Holt muttered. "It's only going to get worse," Iris said grimly. "Delta, what's our next target?" Delta pointed to the starfield ahead. "The Battle of Antares. If the Sovereigns succeed there, humanity's spirit of unity is erased forever." "Then let's make sure they fail," Iris replied, her determination unwavering. "Kiera, set course. We're not done yet." The ship surged forward, disappearing into the swirling chaos of fractured time. The epoch breaker emerged from its second temporal jump into a scene of utter devastation. The Battle of Antares, once a pivotal moment in human history, was now barely recognizable. Wrecked starships drifted lifelessly in space, their twisted hulls glinting in the light of a dying star. Fires raged uncontrollably on the remaining human vessels, their defenses overwhelmed by the Sovereign's assault. Colonel Iris Vega took in the chaos with a grim expression. "We're late," she muttered, her fingers tightening around the edge of her console. Delta's voice was calm, though her eyes betrayed concern. "The timeline's already destabilized. If we don't act quickly, this moment will collapse entirely, and humanity's victory here will be erased." "Not on my watch," Iris snapped. "Kiera, get us into the thick of it. Holt, prepare the weapons. We'll give these Sovereigns something to remember." Kiera's son maneuvered the epoch breaker through the debris field, evading incoming fire from sleek, angular Sovereign warships. "We've got 6 hostiles locking onto us," she reported. "Shields at 60% and dropping fast." "Wrecker, I need a solution," Iris called. Holt's voice crackled over the comms from engineering. "Patching up a shield that advanced is like duct taping a black hole, Colonel. But I'll buy us time. Don't waste it." Carr's voice chimed in, frantic but determined. "If we can isolate the Sovereign's temporal beacon, we can disrupt their command network, but it's embedded on one of their lead ships. Getting to it will be suicidal." "That's a problem for later," Iris replied. "Kiera, take us in." The epoch breaker dove straight into the heart of the battle. Human ships, battered but unyielding, rallied to its arrival. Iris broadcast a message to the remaining fleet. "This is Colonel Iris Vega aboard the epoch breaker. Humanity's survival depends on this fight. Stand with us, and we'll make history again." The human captains responded with a surge of energy, their ships reforming into a desperate battle line. As the Sovereigns redirected their forces to meet this renewed resistance, Iris ordered Delta and Carr to isolate the beacon's signal. "There," Delta said, pointing to a Sovereign dreadnought in the distance. "That's our target. If we disable it, their fleet will lose coordination." "Wrecker, can you rig something to breach their defenses?" Iris asked. Holt's grin was audible through the comms. "Already on it. You'll have one shot, Colonel. Make it count." The epoch breaker launched its payload, a jury-rigged missile designed to overload the Sovereign's temporal shields. It struck true, shattering the dreadnought's defenses and exposing the beacon. Kiera brought the ship in close, and Delta led a strike team aboard to disable the device. The mission was a success, but at a cost. Kiara was gravely injured during the extraction, and the Epoch Breaker's temporal drive took heavy damage. The Sovereign's fleet withdrew, but the timeline remained fractured. Back on the bridge, Iris surveyed her exhausted crew. "This wasn't the victory we needed," she said quietly, "but it's a start." Delta's voice broke the silence. "The Sovereigns will adapt. This was just one battle in a much larger war." Iris nodded. "Then we'll fight them at every turn. Humanity doesn't quit." The crew set their eyes forward, knowing the hardest battles were yet to come. The Epoch Breaker limped through fractured time, its systems groaning under the strain of repeated combat and temporal jumps. The crew worked tirelessly to patch up the damage, but tension ran high. Every fleeting moment of quiet felt like a prelude to disaster. Colonel Iris Vega stood in the observation deck, staring at the swirling chaos of the rift outside. She clenched her jaw as Dr. Elias Carr joined her, his expression more strained than usual. "We're not going to survive another engagement like Antares," Carr said, breaking the silence. "The ship wasn't designed for this kind of prolonged use. The temporal core is destabilizing, and without a proper recalibration, our next jump could scatter us across multiple timelines." Iris turned to him, her eyes hard. "We don't have a choice. The Sovereigns are regrouping, and the temporal citadel is our only chance to stop them at the source. Can you fix it or not?" Carr hesitated, his hands twitching as if grappling with an invisible weight. "I'll do what I can." He left before Iris could press further, and she watched him go, unease settling in her gut. In engineering, Holt worked furiously to repair the damaged shield matrix. "Wrecker, how's it looking?" Iris asked, stepping into the room. "Barely holding together," Holt replied without looking up. "Every time we jump, this thing feels like it's going to tear itself apart, but I'll keep her running. Somehow." Their conversation was interrupted by Delta's arrival. Her presence always carried an air of quiet authority, but this time, her expression was grim. "We have a problem," Delta said. "Carr's been spending a lot of time in the temporal core, more than necessary for repairs." "What are you saying?" Iris asked, her tone sharp. Delta's gaze didn't waver. "He's hiding something. I don't trust his intentions." Iris's stomach twisted, but she kept her composure. "Keep an eye on him, discreetly. If he's up to something, I want to know before it's too late." Hours later, the alarm blared. Iris rushed to the bridge, where Kiara, still recovering from her injuries, struggled to steady the ship. "We've got Sovereign ships closing in," Kiara reported. "How did they find us so quickly?" Iris's mind raced, the pieces falling into place. "Care," she growled. She stormed toward the temporal core, Delta at her side. They arrived to find Carr standing before the shimmering core, a Sovereign communication device in his hand. "Elias," Iris said, her voice cold. "What have you done?" Carr turned to face her, guilt etched across his features. "I didn't have a choice, Iris. They promised me. They promised they could fix it. Bring her back." "Your daughter," Iris said, understanding dawning. "You betrayed us for a lie." Carr's hand hovered over the core's control panel. "It's not a lie. They can rewrite the timeline, erase her death." Delta stepped forward, her voice icy. "At the cost of billions. Don't do this." For a moment, Carr wavered. Then the Sovereigns attacked. Explosions rocked the ship as Iris drew her sidearm. "Carr, step away from the controls," she commanded. Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he slammed his hand down on the panel, and the Epoch Breaker lurched violently as a massive Sovereign boarding party breached the hull. The betrayal had begun, and the war against time itself was about to take a darker turn. The Epoch Breaker staggered through time and space, its systems barely holding together as the Sovereign boarding party carved through the ship's corridors. Explosions rocked the vessel, sending showers of sparks raining down on the beleaguered crew. Colonel Iris Vega fought her way through the chaos, her blaster firing with precision as she led her team toward the temporal core. Seal off Deck 3. Iris shouted into her comlink. We can't let them reach engineering. Holt's voice crackled back, ragged but determined. Working on it, but they've got tech we've never seen before. Don't take too long up there, Colonel. Delta appeared beside her, dispatching a sovereign soldier with ruthless efficiency. The longer we stay, the worse this gets. The Citadel is the key. We have to jump now, even if the ship's barely holding together. Not without care, Iris said, her tone sharp. He's going to answer for this. They reached the temporal core just as Carr was frantically inputting commands into the console. The glowing core pulsed erratically, its energy spilling out in dangerous arcs. He turned at their approach, his expression torn between guilt and defiance. You don't understand, Carr shouted over the hum of the unstable core. The Citadel is more than a sovereign stronghold. It's the source of their power. If we take control of it, we can rewrite everything, our way. Delta raised her weapon. You've done enough damage, Carr. Step away from the controls. Carr hesitated, his hand hovering over the console. I didn't want this, but they forced my hand. If we don't stop them now, it's over for all of us. Then help us fix this, Iris demanded. No more games, no more secrets. What else are you hiding about the Citadel? Carr took a shaky breath. The Citadel isn't just a fortress. It's alive. A sentient temporal construct. The Sovereigns didn't build it. They found it, just like we found the Rift. It feeds on time itself, rewriting history to sustain its existence. If we can sever its connection to the timelines, we can destroy it. But what? Iris pressed. Carr's voice dropped to a whisper. Doing so will erase everything it's touched, including us. The timeline we know might not survive. Before Iris could respond, another explosion rocked the ship. Kiara's voice cut through the comms. Colonel, the Sovereigns are regrouping. If we're going to make that jump, it has to be now. Iris turned to Carr. Stabilize the core. We're jumping straight into the Citadel. Carr hesitated but obeyed, his hands moving over the console with practiced speed. The core's chaotic energy stabilized, and the ship's systems roared back to life. Delta locked eyes with Iris. If the Citadel is alive, it won't go down without a fight. Be ready for anything. Iris nodded, her resolve hardening. We didn't come this far to fail. Kiara, take us in. The epoch breaker surged forward, plunging through the rift one last time. Ahead of them, the temporal citadel loomed, a massive, otherworldly structure shimmering with unnatural energy, its design defying logic and reason. As the ship emerged into its shadow, the citadel seemed to awaken, its countless spires shifting and glowing, as if recognizing a threat. The final battle was about to begin. The epoch breaker emerged into a surreal expanse where reality itself seemed to fray. The temporal citadel floated at the center, a vast and shifting construct of light and shadow. Its spires twisted in impossible geometries, radiating pulses that warped the very fabric of spacetime. Around it swarmed a fleet of sovereign ships, their sleek forms shimmering like specters, as if existing in multiple timelines at once. Colonel Iris Vega stood on the bridge, her hands gripping the console as the alarms screamed. Status report. Shields barely holding, Wrecker Holt growled over the comms. This ship wasn't made to face a literal nightmare, Colonel. Kiara Sun's voice cut in, steady despite the chaos. They've locked onto us. We've got incoming. The first wave of sovereign fire hammered the epoch breaker. The ship lurched violently, sparks flying as overloaded systems erupted. Iris braced herself and turned to Delta. Can we disable the Citadel's defenses remotely? Delta's expression was grim. Not remotely. The Citadel is self-aware. It will resist any external attempts. We'll need to get inside and sever the core manually. Fantastic, Kiara muttered as she threw the ship into an evasive maneuver. Elias Carr, hunched over his station, frantically input data. I can create a temporal distortion around the Citadel to buy us time, but I'll need direct access to its energy output once we're inside, and it's going to destabilize our systems even more. Do it, Iris ordered. Holt, prep the boarding team. We're taking the fight to them. The epoch breaker weaved through the chaos, Kiera pulling off daring maneuvers that forced the Sovereign fleet to split its attention. Meanwhile, Holt armed the boarding team with everything they had: pulse rifles, temporal disruptors, and a handful of experimental devices Kiera had cobbled together. As the ship approached the Citadel, it seemed to react, its spires shifting to form a massive energy barrier. Carr shouted, "They're redirecting power from their fleet to block us. This is our window. Punch through it," Iris commanded. The epoch breaker unleashed a concentrated barrage of railgun fire, tearing a breach in the barrier. The ship hurtled through, narrowly avoiding another salvo from the Sovereign fleet, and docked at a jagged protrusion of the Citadel's structure. The boarding team deployed into the Citadel's interior, stepping into a labyrinth of shimmering corridors that pulsed with an eerie, organic energy. Every surface seemed alive, reacting to their presence. Delta led the way, her weapon at the ready. The core is at the center. Expect resistance, and not just from the Sovereigns. They pushed forward, fighting through waves of Sovereign soldiers and manifestations of the Citadel itself, energy constructs that emerged from the walls, their forms shifting unpredictably. At the heart of the Citadel, they found the core, a massive, pulsating sphere of pure temporal energy, suspended in an intricate lattice of alien machinery. Carr's face went pale. It's connected to every timeline we've ever known. Severing it will reset everything. No time for hesitation, Iris said, her voice firm. Do what you have to do. We'll hold them off. As Carr began the process of destabilizing the core, the Citadel itself roared in defiance. The walls trembled, and the Sovereigns pressed their attack. The crew fought desperately, each second bought with sweat and blood. The final confrontation was here, and the fate of all timelines rested in their hands. The heart of the Citadel pulsed with raw, living energy, its tendrils weaving through the corridors, thrumming with a sentient, malevolent intelligence. Iris Vega stood at the front, her weapon raised as the Sovereign forces pressed forward, unrelenting. Every blast from her rifle was a desperate cry for survival. Behind her, Delta, Kiera, and Holt were fighting with everything they had. The chaos around them was deafening. Explosions, energy blasts, the shriek of twisted metal. At the center of it all, Elias Carr worked furiously, his hands trembling as he interfaced with the Citadel's core. The energy around him warped and shifted, each movement of his fingers causing the walls to pulse with violent force. "We don't have much time," Carr grunted. "The core is reacting faster than I can stabilize it. If I don't sever the connection soon, we'll be caught in the collapse." Iris turned back to face him, pushing forward through the onslaught. "We've fought too hard to fail now. Keep going, Carr. We'll hold them off." Delta unleashed a burst of fire, her focus unshaken. "We're not letting this thing end us. Not like this." The Sovereigns were relentless, their weapons tearing into the walls, sending shockwaves through the Citadel. It was clear now that they had no intention of retreating. The Citadel was their god, their weapon, their victory, and they were willing to die to protect it. But Iris wasn't about to let that happen. Not after everything humanity had fought for. She glanced back to Kiera, who was already setting explosives along the walls, creating a path for them to retreat if needed. "We're almost there," Kiera called over the comm. "I've set the charges. If this goes sideways, we've got a way out." Iris nodded, her eyes never leaving Carr. The seconds stretched into eternity as the battle raged on around them. The walls trembled, the Citadel fighting to preserve itself, but Carr's determination was unwavering. With a final, resounding command, the Citadel's core sparked and then exploded in a flash of blinding light. The sound was deafening, the force of it a shockwave that knocked everyone to the ground. The Epoch Breaker shook violently, and for a moment, it felt as though time itself had shattered. The Citadel's essence, the very foundation of the Sovereign's power, began to unravel. The walls, once so imposing, now twisted and collapsed in on themselves, fading into nothingness. The Sovereigns had no time to react. They had been defeated, their timeline-dominating weapon erased from existence. When the light finally faded and the chaos subsided, the crew of the Epoch Breaker staggered to their feet, bloodied but alive. The Citadel was gone. The Sovereign's grip on time had been broken. Iris exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. "We did it." Carr, still panting from the effort, turned to her. "You should know. There's no going back now. The timeline has been changed. We've created a new reality." Iris looked out at the starfield ahead. The Epoch Breaker floated in a quiet, fractured cosmos. The war was over, but a new beginning stretched before them, one where humanity was no longer the prey of those who sought to control time. "Then we'll make sure we get it right this time," Iris said, her voice firm. "Humanity has earned its place in the universe." With the Sovereigns defeated and the Citadel destroyed, the crew of the Epoch Breaker knew their mission was only the beginning. Time was no longer their enemy, it was their ally. The future was theirs to shape. And with that, the Epoch Breaker surged forward into the new dawn of humanity's future, where the past would never control them again.